Appreciate everybody joining us today. We've got a brief webinar here, about 30 minutes, where we're going to talk about improving the organization's ability to match member data, essentially person information, consumers, in 2 simple steps. The background to this event was this semi-sad picture of me standing in front of some empty tables at the IAM Symposium recently at the end of September. We really had a great event. It was a terrific opportunity to meet a lot of the folks from the different Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, explain to them how we're affecting and helping healthcare organizations unify their member information. But unfortunately, I think this was sort of ill-timed. We were bright and early 8 a.m., so we didn't have a strong attendance, which obviously is the genesis for this webinar, and I appreciate all of you joining and hearing us out on how we think we can help your organization. So thank you for attending. Now, so the agenda that I'm going to go through here, number one, I'm going to talk a little bit about member matching, and I'm sure you've heard of these programs as Member 360 or Unified View or a complete single view of members or consumers, how those projects are becoming a lot more difficult to deliver, and there's real challenges in doing that, and kind of what's happened in the environment that has led to a lot of the challenges. Well, you know, it's an important topic. I'll talk a little deeper on that topic in terms of why it's a challenge and why traditional or conventional technologies like MDM and other solutions that are out there, either homegrown or through some ETL processing, how those technologies may be challenged and are not really delivering in the complete picture that your organizations need. I'll talk a little bit about the referential matching technology. So I'll step right into our ideas and our approach and our solutions to help address the real problem in 2 sort of simple steps. And then I'll talk about the concept of referential matching and really the process that we employ and the technology that we employ to deliver and meeting the demands of creating a complete Member 360. And then we'll answer some questions from there. So to start, and this is a scenario that, you know, I'm pretty familiar with. I go back in this industry about, as Nick said, about 15, 20 years, and I've worked with a lot of the large healthcare insurance companies across the United States, including the PBMs as well. So I've worked with lots of different, probably 15 different Blue plans. I've worked with the large folks that are out there like United and Cigna and Humana and the other folks, but I have a history of working in this environment. And really, what I've seen, and this was true probably 20 years ago, true 15 years ago, and certainly is true today, that the environment is really changing drastically. So, you know, a decade ago or 15 years ago, it was a pretty simple problem in terms of managing your member data and your member files. You know, most of the coverage was employer-based and sponsored through employers, so you were getting direct feeds from those employers. It articulated who the member was, and it was, you know, the relationship with the employer or the organization was kind of paramount. And then you obviously have these rosters that you had to use and you know, integrate into your organization and your processes in order to, you know, perform your function. But the data was, you know, pretty consistent because it was coming from kind of one channel in one one specific sort of distribution method. And as many of you know, and many of you can attest to now, that environment has radically changed. So employer-based coverage has been declining for a number of years. We see really a direct-to-consumer model that's obviously out there through the marketplaces and through some consumer direct initiatives. We're seeing not only that in terms of where you're getting information, but the types of information that you're getting. So you're getting data about people's lifestyles. There's a greater role of the clinical information that's coming into play. There's survey information. And then in the backdrop, there's sort of volatile membership information that's not as consistent as it was before, when people had a job for, you know, 20 years and you basically got your health insurance through your employer and that's the data they got. Well, now there's more volatility in all of that. And then there's just a wide variety of characteristically that data is just looks a lot different. It's a lot different in terms of quality. It's really different in terms of completeness, what's actually there. Ultimately, though, you're getting all this new data with just characteristically very different information. and you still have the task and the challenge of putting that together. So, 10, 15 years ago, people were using MDM technologies, ETL technologies, and they have developed their own, solutions, and that was really well adopted and worked, for the most part because of the environment. And what we see today, given that the sources of information have changed, the characteristic of that data has changed, it's just those tools, the traditional MDM technologies, the traditional ETL technologies, and the homegrown solutions are still leading to essentially fragmented data. It's because there's just this influx and this sort of massive amount of influx about the individual consumer. Now, on the other side of that, if you look at the reasons why you're trying to take all this information about your consumers, about your members together, there's a wide variety of business reasons, and some of them more popular more recently, but there's a wide variety of demands for this information. So you're taking membership information, you're trying to create this 360-degree view like you've done historically, and it's incredibly more challenging now. And then you have this greater demand because you have to, process claims more efficiently. You have to make sure your adjudication rates are high and that there's, automata that's employed through your claims process. You have to coordinate amongst multiple payers, potentially multiple participants in both the sort of payment of claims and the care of the individual. There's also this notion that the model of healthcare in general is changing from fee-for-service to value-based care and essentially risk-based contracts. So there's this notion of the idea that you have to have a better understanding of your member or your consumer's existing health and what the risk looks like within that population in order to adequately cover, in order to adequately provide health insurance to those folks. You have to have a good handle on their existing risk. There's also lots and lots of initiatives across the health insurance ecosystem where people are trying to create that member-centric strategy, that consumer-centric strategy where they want to offer additional services, they want to engage with the particular consumer directly, they want to market, they want to sell, they want to interact with the consumer directly, and all of those strategies, put a heavy demand on your ability to have a single view of the actual consumer. And then there's lots of quality reporting initiatives around, the HEDIS and STARS metrics that are out there. There's a greater emphasis both from a compliance perspective and really a financial motivators around, assessing the quality of the care that you're providing to your members. And then there's lots and lots of, and this has been the case for 10 years now, portals and activities where, there is this, a technology layer of your infrastructure that is designed to interact directly with your members. And that's all placing significant demands on this ability to unify the data. And we know that the technologies are antiquated and the environment's rapidly changing. So just as a poll to see where we're at amongst the attendees here, we have a quick poll that I'd like you to answer in terms of your organizations and whether or not have you deployed an MDM solution, a master data management solution to unify your member data? Have you built your own member mastering capability for that member data, maybe through some legacy technologies or just, good old-fashioned custom development? And then kind of on the flip side of that, are your needs being met or not being met by your ETL, your homegrown MDM solution across the enterprise? There's a backlog of projects behind that. Or have you just never, ever addressed the issues of mastering member information? Have you just never attempted to address that problem? Certainly, I've seen some of the folks out in the market that really just, for a lot of reasons, haven't tried to attack that. And I'll give you guys a second, Nick, if you could initiate the poll. And if you guys could answer, that'd be pretty helpful. So I'll give it a second here as we ask the attendees to respond back. All right, so answers coming in. Yeah, so, not surprisingly, it's a pretty decent mix amongst the answers here. So some people have actually deployed MDM for master data management. Not surprisingly, that's a popular technology that I worked with 10 years ago. Some folks have built their own pretty even distribution. You know, there is attendees, a couple that are saying the needs aren't being met by the MDM ETL homegrown solution. That's also not surprising. And then there's actually a fair amount of folks saying they never deployed or built a member mastering solution, and that's frankly not all that surprising. Looking back in my history and working with Initiate and working with all the health insurance companies that I worked with, while we were very successful and a lot of them had deployed MDM technology or something around unifying master data or unifying member data, you know, a lot of them just felt it was very cost prohibitive, and the value to it, given the fact that these were historically 6 to 18-month projects and could be, you know, millions of dollars, a lot of folks were hesitant to sort of jump into that space. So that's not surprising to see that folks also never really deployed the solution, which is going to be interesting for us as we talk about what we can offer and what we're doing, specifically Verato, in this space. So I appreciate you guys answering that poll. Let's talk in turning to really sort of the conventional technologies and conventional approaches. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, what's their challenge and why they're failing, kind of consistent with the poll that we just saw. You know, really it can be characterized in sort of, and I alluded to this before, but two sort of, you know, major categories. I mentioned the problem of unifying member information is really can be challenging now, and that the previous technologies aren't really positioned well to resolve, you know, completely the member's identity and rationalize all the member data, because those things really, you know, they're algorithmic functions, they're complex, but they really, based on the wide variety of the data, the volatility of the data, they can't get to all problems. So we see a fair amount, and this is kind of consistent with what we've seen in the market, that the traditional technologies and the traditional approaches, you know, that are 30 years old, cannot keep pace and did not completely resolve the problem. Really just can't deal with all the data that they're getting and the characteristics of all the data. And then, you know, the second half of that, and this is more related to what I talked about in terms of the actual deployment of these MDM technologies, the homegrown deployment, they're really expensive and they're labor intensive. They take a long time to deploy. They have, you know, wide enterprise appeal for sure, right? What insurance company doesn't want to unify their member data so that, you know, when somebody calls on the phone, that you know their entire legacy and their entire history with your organization, or you can assess their clinical situation, or you can, you know, more accurately get a comprehensive profile of what interactions you've had with them. But the problem is it was very expensive in terms of the license for that technology, because it was traditional perpetual technology that had a lot of trailing costs. So there was implementation time that I mentioned before. There was maintenance and hardware and tuning and upgrades. Security was always a challenge because you had to wrap this stuff obviously in significant security. And then you weren't even done there, because based on kind of previous statement, the data being highly volatile, of, you know, challenging quality, you had to invest heavily into a data stewardship program, a program that, you know, leveraged the existing tools and technology that could automate a portion of the population, but then you just had to pour manual labor against it and try to get to the 10 to 20% of the data that actually didn't match or didn't create a unified view. So, you know, it's a challenging environment for these technologies in these two specific regards. So let's talk about how to make it better, and let's talk how to essentially improve your ability to unify the member data, because we know it's important, in pretty simple steps. So number one, there is a concept, an approach that we leverage called referential matching. We have a plugin to all of the sort of major master data management technologies out there, and even to your homegrown technologies, even if you've got, you know, a custom built deployment that you're trying to unify your member data. We can use our referential matching approach, and I'm going to get into it in a second what that actually means, to actually just dramatically improve the ability to match these folks. And I'll talk about what that means. I mentioned before that the volatility of the data, the quality of the data really is the challenge at the end of the day. And so we can leverage our approach to essentially address that challenge and really optimize the performance of your existing MDM or your homegrown ability. Now, on the flip side of that, we can also rapidly deploy our using the category software master data management technology, but our SaaS-based unification platform, Verato Universal Master Person Index, to essentially deploy identical functionality to what the MDM systems have done, the homegrown ability to do this, but at a drastically reduced cost. So the fact that it's a SaaS platform, the fact that it's built on modern technology, and I'm going to get into it in a second, with this referential matching approach, drastically reduces the costs associated with deploying a technology. So much so that, you know, we've seen good adoption where this technology has been used departmentally, maybe even for sort of quick deployments where there's a desire to, maybe for quality reporting or something else, address the member population. And we've seen, you know, in comparison, if you're looking at a traditional master data management technology or Verato's Universal Master Patient Index, we see to about a 2 to 3 times lower TCO over like a 4-year period relative to those technologies. So, you know, not surprisingly, a modern SaaS platform can deliver this technology and this capability much more cost effectively. So that brings us to the 2 products that we use and that we deploy and market in this space, and naturally aligned to what I just talked about, both based on this referential matching concept. Both are cloud-based SaaS solutions that are designed ultimately to, on the left-hand side, either improve what you're already doing or essentially provide the functionality that you may or may not have deployed, like some of those folks that responded to the poll that they have not actually deployed a technology. So we offer Verato Auto Steward. It is a essentially plug-in adapter that goes right into your master data management, if it's IDM Initiate or any of the other popular MDM solutions out there. We can plug directly next to and with that technology to handle the, you know, upwards of 10, it could be 10 to 20% is probably the average. We've seen sort of dramatic situations where it's over that 30 to 40%, but handle all of the problematic matches that are based on that low quality volatility of the underlying member information. So we can essentially bolt right next to your MDM system to improve its ability, or your custom deployment deployed or developed solution to improve the overall match rate. And essentially without obviously a whole lot of labor, without a whole lot of you know, significant deployment costs. Then on the right-hand side, this is a situation where, you know, if you're one of those folks that responded back, hey, we never deployed or built any member mastering capability because it was expensive, it took a long time, it's, you know, just wasn't nimble or agile or effective enough for us to build the case, we offer Verato Universal Master Patient Index or Person Index. That solution is essentially, you can think about it as a functionally a master data management solution for person information. And that uses our same SaaS-based approach and our referential matching, unique referential matching approach. So let me step into that a little bit and talk about what referential matching is and the foundation of how we provide this kind of unique capability. So as I said, we have a very comprehensive set of solutions that leverage this referential matching concept. And the whole idea behind referential matching is the challenges related to the volatility, the quality, and the variability of the underlying information about your members. So you've got clinical data, you've got survey data, you've got information coming from a variety of channels about your particular consumers. Our assertion is that, and what we've seen within our analysis and work with our different customers, is about 30% of that data that you have about your people is off. It's off in some way, it's incorrect, it's out of date, it's misaligned, you know, something about it is problematic, and obviously not for any real nefarious reasons. It's just this data is really problematic. It changes. People move. 17% of the population moves every year. That's not going to change. People get married. People change numbers. People change names. It's really problematic. So that's leading to this inability to essentially effectively unify all your membership information. And our referential matching approach sort of recognizes that problem. So what we have as a backdrop to all of our ability to improve your member matching is a reference database. So we have built through a collection of essentially data aggregators and sources, we have built and procured a comprehensive identity database across the entire US that spans about 30 years of history and represents about 300 million people. So we essentially have unified the US population in our solution and 30 years of their demographic history. And not only does it include the demographic history, it also includes incorrect or similar sort of data about the people that we've established their identities. So whether it be I got my name or my SSN commingled with my dad's on a loan and therefore it ended up on some credit report, we know that my dad's SSN associated with me is incorrect because we have this authoritative source of identity information about me. We're constantly updating that reference database. So we receive about 60 million updates per month that we process. And then we have an entire data science team and engineers that support those guys in order to continually improve this and make this available. And then we have, as I said, we've combined this not only from sort of like one particular area or one particular industry, like some of the data providers out there, but we've actually spanned multiple industries. So we combine this demographic data from multiple aggregation points that are orthogonal in nature, meaning that they don't sort of corrupt each other. They start from origination points about people that are different. So we know that we have a good trusted set of information. And as I mentioned, we use this as a backdrop to our ability to unify the actual member information. So a pretty simple example here is a traditional MDM matching technology, traditional custom developed matching solution that is designed to put together Catherine Smith and Kat Johnson and say, okay, are these the same person? I want to put together this information because there's a portal or I need to create a clinical profile or for whatever other reason. But they're going to look at these two records. Traditional MDM or homegrown solution going to look at these two records and say, well, I'm probably not the same person, right? We've got essentially vastly different names. Kat and Catherine may be similar, but Smith and Johnson certainly are not. The address is inconsistent, and then we've got a date of birth on one side and an SSN on the other side. And so a traditional MDM system is never going to be able to put this information together to say that there's one person out in the world that represents this identity. It's just going to be a mismatch based on misalignment and just sort of normal things that happen in people's data. But if you look at our approach and you look at the use of a reference database and essentially the concept of referential matching, you'll notice that we have a longitudinal record about Catherine Smith. So we know that at one point in time in her life, she was, went by Kat, which is a nickname of Catherine. She changed her name. It used to be Johnson. Now it's Smith. And kept married. And not surprisingly, she probably moved too from one address to another. But we have all this information on file so that when we line up the specific demographics, we can confidently tell you, hey, that's the same person. So this is a missed opportunity in conventional approaches, or this is an opportunity where somebody, unfortunately, a steward is going to have to pore over using whatever they can, reports or other systems within the enterprise, and try to ascertain whether or not these two records are actually the same person. Yet out of the box, this is our core functionality, and this is the sort of concept of referential matching to fill the gaps and to address the quality and volatility and variability issues in the underlying information. So Verato solutions, I mentioned before, they're fast in the sense that they can be deployed quickly. We have deployments of our Universal Master Person Index in like 54 days. We have others that have taken in similar timeframes, but relative to the MDM market and the other technologies that used to take 6 to 18 months, obviously they're fast and easy to implement relative to those folks. They're simple, so we have our technology built in such a way that it can easily be adopted and integrated into your process, to your workflows, to your portals, and your other sort of, your ecosystem of how you're going to use this unified member data through modern APIs. It's secure. Verato is a HIPAA compliant, PCI SOC 2 Type 2, and we're actually a high trust certified vendor, which within the healthcare industry is, many of you know, is sort of the pinnacle of security certification. And then scalable. So we, as a SaaS-based solution, as a cloud-based technology, have the ability to scale to the elasticity, with the elasticity of a cloud technology. So hundreds of millions of records and can support sub-second response times. In summary, we use SaaS-based referential matching solutions in sort of two ways. We can help folks that already have something in place and they're trying their best to do a good job at this by plugging in our auto steward technology. We can essentially improve your ability to perform that function of unifying your member data. We can deploy our technology quickly, so that means we can be very nimble and address projects that may have limited time frame or challenging budget scenarios, or just really volatile data or sparse information. We can deploy that universal master person index quickly to do that. And then, for organizations that are looking to have a master index of their member information, we can deploy as an enterprise-wide solution that can meet your enterprise needs, given our characteristics as a SaaS solution with a very low total cost of ownership. So we've got about 2 minutes left here. I wanted to turn it over to the crowd and see if there's any questions for us.
Yeah, hey Jason. We had one question come in just now. What's an example of a use case where traditional MDM doesn't work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So master data management technologies were widely deployed. They served a lot of needs in the areas, and it really gets back to this notion of characteristically the data has changed, and it's volatile, it's of low quality, it's problematic. So one of the use cases we've deployed our technology for, and it's just classically where the reasons why you deploy a Verato is in the quality reporting space. So all the health insurance companies and working through Medicaid and Medicare and in their own operations have quality measures that they have to essentially ascertain. Part of doing that quality exercise is capturing the clinical information and unifying that clinical information underneath a member, sort of classic MDM use case. The problem is MDM technologies are good at matching when they have very rich data sets. But when you're talking about clinical data, there can be a lot of holes and a lot of blind spots. So traditional MDM technology could be put in place and was put in place for this problem. The problem is supplemental data like laboratory and survey information. Well, it's sparse in nature. So you feed that into an MDM technology, it doesn't give you really good results. Just because, kind of like that Catherine and Cat Johnson example that we showed before, if I'm trying to do quality reporting and I get laboratory information about Cat that I need to associate to Catherine's profile, a traditional MDM technology is not going to be able to do that. But that's precisely where the use of your Verato's Universal Master Person Index could step in, and based on our cloud deployment and also more importantly the referential matching concept, we can fill that gap. We know that Kat and Catherine are the same person. We can associate that laboratory event to her clinical profile and therefore affect essentially her quality measure if she's part of a Medicaid or Medicare population, or maybe even in a risk-based population. So that's a perfect use case where we can kind of highlight the difference. So it's a good question. Any other questions, Nick? I think we're out of time here.
Yeah, we're out of time. There are a few more that came in, but we'll follow up with everyone individually once we close the webinar. So thanks again, Jason, for a great presentation, and thanks to everyone who attended. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.